Welcome to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast, your trusted M&A team. Here's your host, Russell Cohen.
You're deep in the deal. The numbers, well, looking pretty solid until the quality of earnings report drops. Well, suddenly, things don't look quite as promised. So what now? Today, we're talking about the delicate yet high-stakes move of renegotiating price post-QOE, when to push back, how to keep the deal alive, and where buyers and sellers get it wrong. Welcome, everyone, to the South Florida M&A Advisors Podcast. Jeremy Wolf here, joined by the man, the myth, the legend, your host, Russell Cohen. Russell, always a pleasure to see you, brother.
Hey, good morning, Jeremy. Thanks for doing these podcasts with me. It's a lot of fun, and hopefully we're educating one seller at a time.
Absolutely, man. Education is key. So with that in note, talk to the listener out there that maybe doesn't know, what exactly is a quality of earnings report, and why is it such a turning point in the deal process?
Well, it's very simple. You work your entire life to build your business. You think your books are awesome, right? And sometimes, you spend a lot of money on your books. The private equity group is working off GAAP accounting, and you're not. So there definitely could be discrepancies that you never thought would be, and they're not expecting all these smaller businesses that are growing up to be nice, really large businesses to be based on GAAP accounting. It's just not there. But the quality of earnings, you went through that. You bring the business to market, interview a whole bunch of private equity groups, you go into negotiations, multiple LOIs, you finally get the deal, you negotiate the deal, the attorney's involved, your bill on the attorney clock starts, and so everyone's spending money, and you get to the LOI and you have this incredible price, you're really happy, everything makes sense. And then you go through the quality of earnings, which is a colonoscopy on steroids, I always call it. Crazy. They're gonna look at everything. They're gonna have to ask you to pull out documentation from 20 years ago. It's incredible. And the bigger the deal, the bigger the scope is, basically. From accounting, from legal, from benefits, from environmental, from all different types of insurance. It could be 6 different categories that go into your business. And then you spent like 60 to 75 days providing all this documentation. You're getting burned out, and they come back with a quality of earnings report, and it may not match to what you thought it was making. So the quality of earnings, the private equity group hires a very high-powered accounting firm, and that's their job to go through everything in your company, because they have exposure themselves. Post-closing, you close on this deal, and they missed it, and they got exposure. So they are relentless to find out if your accounting is accurate too. So what you invest in your business for your accounting, eventually will either get you through, or either canceled or completely renegotiated. So it's vital to have the right players in place, and to put the money into the accounting to make it work.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, is this commonplace? I'd imagine it is. Is this an issue that you encounter frequently in deals?
Well, listen, if your business is growing and you're on a hockey stick growth,
you're not of a concern.
The business just exploded. You won't run into a problem. The private equity group would probably clear through the diligence, and hoping that you're not going to renegotiate. And so, but if you have a great business, if the numbers are trending down, meaning maybe if you're in construction and the work has not kicked in, and your current year numbers are not, trailing 12 months are not what you represented in the calendar year, that will cause a renegotiation. So the private equity groups definitely want to renegotiate, but if you have a business that's so strong and growing, they can't. So that's where you want to be. You want to be where they're in a position that they that they can't negotiate with you.
So you just mentioned a couple of kind of, I guess, red flags. You're talking about, obviously, if the business is on an uptrend, hockey stick growth, it's not so much of an issue. And obviously, if it's stagnating or even going down, it's going to bring some concerns up for the buyer. What are some other red flags that typically prompt the buyer to reconsider the agreed upon price?
So I'm representing a plumbing company in South Florida, and the majority in new construction. So in this particular scenario, their jobs, they miscalculated their jobs. Their jobs didn't start on time. So, we're looking at the first 4 months and the revenues are down. So the trailing 12 months are not there. The first 5 months are not there. So, yeah, so when you enroll with me, you better keep your eye on the prize and keep the business running at full tilt, whatever it takes, because during the QV, they're going to ask for a trailing 12 months. And if the numbers are off, you're just giving them reasons to renegotiate. A lot of times business owners might have 1099. Let's say in construction, they might have salespeople that are 1099. The private equity group has to put everyone on workers' comp, W-2, put payroll taxes. So to convert the employees over, you wonder if you're going to, lose the employees or reference like that. There's so many ways that a business can go sideways. But if you don't have the proper insurances, underinsured, that causes new expenses. If the owner owns the building, if they're not calculating a fair market rent, and you're dealing with a 10,000 square foot facility and you didn't calculate the proper rent, that will dig into the numbers. So that's why you hire a professional advisor, because if you own the building, chances are the private equity group is not going to buy it. They're going to rent it. So you got to put a regular rent in there. So, I like, if I have an open-minded seller, I like to bring in a fractional CFO to go through their books, just so we kind of know what we're walking into. I see the P&Ls. I see it very clean, but I'm not a CFO and I'm not an accounting expert. But if I can get a fractional CFO to dive into those QuickBooks, we can really see where the hurdles will be in the deal and how they're not tied to GAAP accounting and what the private equity group is going to do. So you got to be willing to spend a little money up front to kind of see where you're running around the track and you got one hurdle here. When they jump over the hurdles, there's so many hurdles to jump over. You just got to be flexible to spend a little money up front to see where the challenges are going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. Best to lay it out on the table as early as possible rather than deal with issues on the back end. So this is obviously, these can be difficult conversations, right? You mentioned it. You work your whole life. You have this image in your mind as the business owner of what your business is, what it's worth. You've reviewed everything on your end and it looks like it's all right. And then all of a sudden, the quality of earnings turns up and it's not what you expected. Now, how do you typically, how are you going to approach a seller when these reports turn up issues? What's the right tone, timing? How do you approach that conversation?
Well, it's a hard conversation. Once again, once you get that number, you think you're getting that number. So it becomes who wants it more? In this scenario where I'm working on my current deal, we know that this private equity group, this is their first entry. So it's called a platform deal. We discussed that in the past with my roofing company. So this is their first entry. So they got to buy this company, or they basically have blew out 25 with no sales, because we're trying to get this deal done in a few months and there's not enough time to close the next deal. So this private equity group, if they don't buy this business, they show nothing for the year of 25. So, and then they got money to deploy. They have to get it out. They got investors. So we're in a very good position because we could read the scenario, okay, and we know they need to buy. But so what ends up happening here is, we have discussion with the seller. We understand the need for them to buy. Seller really is in control. He understands the numbers are not hitting the numbers because the jobs haven't started. So a lot of time we try to keep the top line, and what the private equity group move more money of the purchase price into the earnout. And so what will end up happening, if let's say the down payment was $8 million and it's a $14 million deal, they moved the down payment down to 7, and they put another $1 million into the earnout. And what we're doing is, in this particular scenario, we kept the integrity of the price, moved the $1 million to an earnout, and the earnout begins upon closing for the next trailing 12 months. So there'll be a 2 earnout periods where they can get their money. And basically what you have here is if the seller has the pipeline, which I know my seller does, and they can get the jobs to start rolling in and work starts billing, then they believe they can get their earnout and not sacrifice. So we were able to negotiate and keep the price the same, but we just, the private equity group needed to buy the business, so they shifted some money to the earnout portion. So, there's ways to solve it if the private equity needs to buy. My seller does not need to sell. He would like to sell, but he can wait another year, which is not what I like, but it is what it is. That's kind of like, do all the work and then get nothing and maybe never see a dollar from it. But that's how a good example of solving it,
Yeah. I mean, the motivation is key, right? If you're,
who wants it more?
Yeah. Who wants it more? That's right. If you're not desperate, you're going to have more cards on the table.
And a lot of times the sellers have this incredible business. They're making lots of money. And, unless it's life-changing money, like the $100 million deal, something it's like this particular deal is not life-changing because there's 3 partners and everything. So, they have a runway left in their career. It's not like they're 69, they need to sell tomorrow. They have time on the runway that they can keep working it until they get the right situation for them. So that's not good. Obviously, whatever the seller wants, for me, what can I do? I'm here to satisfy the seller. And if that's what ends up happening, that's what ends up happening. I go back to the drawing board,
So when should a buyer draw a line in the sand and walk away versus trying to restructure a deal? Like, there's got to be a point where, it's time to just fold up shop and move on.
Well, in that particular scenario, if the seller drew a hard line or increased the down payment, then you could lose the deal. I think a lot of the deals are, if you're able to get past that little negotiation, then, you move into the contract, and that's where more minefields are out there in the contract. So we got this contract from the private equity group, and I have like a 3-page response from the seller and the attorney on things they don't like. And it's kind of like a 30,000 square foot view. And if we can't get past this, the seller doesn't want to, keep the tab going for the attorney bill. So he's kind of like drawing a line in the sand because, there's a lot of parts on an LOI that never really get to the seller because it's so many nuances and it all shows up on the contract. So I try to educate the seller way in advance, because a lot of times if it doesn't show up in the LOI, we can put it in the LOI, but if it doesn't, then I try to make them aware of what's coming in the contract, basically. But I think it really comes down to, in the quality of earning, who wants it more or who wants it, less. And in this case, seller is okay. He'll move on. You know what I mean? He'll move on if he has to.
So many moving parts, Russell. It's why I've say this virtually every time we talk. It's why it's so important to have a team like yourself to work with that's really super knowledgeable about this and very creative, because oftentimes just the communication alone can make or break a deal. And whether or not you're able to come up with, like you mentioned, instead of just reducing the price, coming up with workarounds and solutions that can be effective for both parties involved is really, really key. Let's talk a little bit about prevention. You mentioned bringing in a fractional CEO. Let's look a little bit earlier on in the process. What can sellers do? Talk to somebody out there that maybe is not even ready to sell yet, but they know they're going to be selling in the future, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, maybe even 10 years down the road. What are some of the things that you can do early on in the business to set the stage so that when it comes time to sell, you can avoid these surprise QOEs in the first place?
Yeah, it's obviously, don't be the legend in your business. Try to pull yourself away from the business and have that management team that is, there for you, that will, be there for the next owner. Obviously, the original owner is going to stay on for a couple of years, but eventual exit. So kind of prep one person in that team to be the next, key person. So definitely have some key people. Do not be the legend in your own business. Invest in accounting. Make sure you got the right CFO that really understands QuickBooks or understands the construction in this or any business that you're in. If you got a professional CPA, your CPA can probably tell you if your bookkeeper is A, B, or C. Make the investment in the A, because then you'll really be backtracking, and it's good. Companies of this size, you got to be looking at your balance sheet and your financials. You got to be looking at it all the time. So you can't run a company of that size without knowing what's going on. So if you're not, you're running by the seat of your pants. But you really have to make the investment. So you got a CFO, or if you're going to outsource it, get an outsource accounting company that's going to do the QuickBooks and really take control of the books. There's companies out there. They act like a controller, but it's a lot less than $125,000 to really run your books and everything of that nature. So accounting is very important. Get your insurances in place. Make you have all insurances. Make sure you're offering benefits, because the private equity groups have benefits. Make sure you're in compliance with what's going on. Your I-9s, all that stuff. Don't have any illegals. It's endless how people cut corners in business. But as they get bigger and bigger, they realize what they were 10 years ago is they can't run the business. But the books and records are vital. If you don't own the property, that's fine. Get a long-term lease. Try to see if you get off the guarantee. That's important. And if you do own the property, just understand you're gonna charge fair market rent, and you cannot you don't want to kill the cash flow with outlandish rent. You want fair market rent, and the private equity group is your best tenant because you're going to have a long-term residual effect, and you'll be able to get market rent is what they're expecting. So many ways to deals to go sideways, sometimes out of your control. Unfortunately, you have a lot of hands in the cookie jar. You got attorneys, accountants. They're going to do all types of lien searches. Make sure you don't have any liens. You're going to deliver the business debt free. So make sure your debt is, just make sure there's, the IRS is not breathing down your back for tax payments. I mean, all this comes out. Lawsuits. If lawsuits can kill deals too. There's so many ways that you got to be upfront to your advisor. No one wants to find out later on that it's been horrible. You got a lot of skeletons that we call. So a lot of ways to make the deal go.
A lot of dead bodies buried.
Yeah. And this past deal that we're working on, when we took the LOI, the private equity group came in with a four times multiple of the EBITDA. Okay, so they really didn't put a price on it, but we knew the EBITDA was like 3.5, and so we knew we were getting a $14 million deal. But I'm not an expert in M&A, and it was I kind of felt like it was a setup to get renegotiated, because by the time you go through the quality of earnings, sometimes you don't hit that 3.5 because of the GAAP accounting and how what they see as the EBITDA. And that sparked the renegotiation. Next time or in the future, I'll never tell a seller to accept a multiple of EBITDA. We need a price. What is the price? What are you offering? Give me a number. They never put a hard number on the LOI. So lesson learned. All right. This particular plumber fell in love with this private equity group. We had offers for 90% cash, and the seller wanted that earnout. They wanted the rollover equity. He had a son in the business, so he wanted the
son too. They wanted the whole kit and caboodle, as they say.
I brought him cash, 90%, 95% cash offers. He went with an offer I never thought he would take, and it was influenced because the son has another 25-year runway, and he wanted to make sure that he would have a piece of the action going forward. So and that's fine. But I just want to give a lot of choices, and these business owners are adults. They'll make their own decision. They'll pick what's right for them.
You could only lead a horse to the water. You can't make him drink, right?
Yeah, I mean, looking back, listen, we had a 13.5 million in cash, but it's scary. By the time you unwind what you're getting down, by the time you pay a commission, you pay capital gains, there's multiple holdbacks in the deal. And by the time you look at the closing statement, you're like, well, maybe I made a mistake by, earnouts and rollover equity. And that's what I'm trying to avoid, where the seller gets scared at the end,
Yeah. Okay. Russell, before we wrap up here, I want you to give one piece of advice for buyers and one for sellers that are entering into the QOE stage. What would that be?
Well, I mean, these buyers are professional buyers. This is what they do all day. They look at 700 companies a year. So I don't know what I could tell them, but obviously, the only thing I can say to them is that, when I get a seller that's kind of focused on that price, I will tell the buyer they're not motivated. This is it. You're going to lose the deal if you start playing, the renegotiation game. And I will tell them that. I'm not afraid to stand up to a private equity group. And that's great advice. The private equity groups are calling me. They're asking me a lot of questions before we engage with a seller. And they're asking me where do you think this will land? And of course, we want the marketplace to give the final number. But we're selling businesses on planet Earth. We're not selling it on Mars. So, we're gonna hit a multiple that's fair. And obviously every industry is different. But with the seller, I advise them it's going to be a roller coaster ride. You're going to go through a lot of emotions. You just got to really remember why you chose this particular buyer and try to see it through. And I'll be there to kind of give you warnings of the deal and what is coming your way. Then you just gotta, I do this on a day-to-day basis, and a lot of people don't listen to me on my recommendations, but it's really what's coming at them. So the quicker you take my advice and you can learn about what I'm saying, doesn't mean you have to do it, because you have accountants and CPA, accountants, CPAs, and attorneys. But if you do take my advice, you'll be ready for the negotiation and what's coming, and that's important to get through the deal.
All right, very good. I think unless there's anything else to add, I think we'll leave it at that. You have anything else to touch upon, Russell?
Right now there's still a lot of liquidity in the marketplace until there isn't. A lot of private equity groups want your business. They need to deploy capital by the end of the year. And there are lots of private equity groups that we're talking. They want deals. So get your business up to that $1.5 million, $2 million magical number. And the multiples are still there, even though we're in a unstable, unpredictable economy. Private equity world is still going at a breakneck speed. So there is still a very good window to get very good multiples until it's not.
Absolutely. So if you're listening to this out there and you're in that twilight phase, you're getting ready, the thought crossed your mind, it might be time to sell the business, reach out to Russell. He is a wealth of knowledge, and it cannot hurt to have a conversation and try to get all your ducks in a row, even if it's years out. Just to start having these conversations earlier, you're kind of changing and shifting your mindset and getting ready so that
3 years out.
Problems. Yeah.
Got to be 3 years out to start.
It's very smooth. Yeah.
Yep. No doubt.
Good stuff. All right. Guys, if you found this content useful, you know the drill. Don't forget to like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will look forward to catching you next time on the next episode of the South Florida M&A Advisors podcast. Everyone take care. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to the South Florida M&A Advisors podcast. For more information, visit southfloridama.com or contact 954-646-7651.